Welcome to the deep dive. We're jumping right in today.
Yeah, no messing around. We're looking at modern Hollywood.
Exactly. Through the eyes of an insider, actually, and discussed by some pretty passionate movie commentators.
And that insider is actress Dakota Johnson, our source material for this.
Well, this deep dive comes from a YouTube video. Clownfish TV, they were reacting to some comments she made recently.
Right. So our mission here is to take their conversation, what Johnson said, what the Clownfish TV guys thought about it, and really unpack why they think Hollywood feels like, well, Dakota Johnson's word, a hot mess.
We're digging into their points about, how decisions get made, this feeling of risk aversion, and just what kind of movies are getting the green light, strictly based on that source video.
And the hook, the thing that really jumps out, is Johnson basically saying decisions are being made by people who don't watch movies or don't know anything about them.
Yeah, and that studios are just stuck kind of remaking the same stuff.
Over and over.
Okay, so let's dig into that first point from Johnson. This intense risk aversion she talks about. How does she connect that to who's actually making the decisions?
Well, her feeling is it's just really tough for anything original or, interesting to get through because she says decisions are made by committee.
By committee, okay.
And the real kicker for her is that the people on these committees, the ones with the power, well, she says they don't even really watch movies or know anything about them. She thinks that happens a lot.
And the YouTube hosts, the source video, what was their take on that specific point? Did they buy her assessment of these decision makers?
Oh, totally. They really latched onto that. They agreed that studios right now don't seem like they know what they should be making.
Right. Lost at sea, sort of.
Yeah, and they echoed that made by committee feeling, especially, they said, because everything costs so much now. They see that whole committee thing as like a direct result of studios being unsure, trying to play it.
But ironically making things worse, maybe.
Yeah.
Stifling the actual creativity.
That's the implication, yeah.
Now, they brought her own experience into it, didn't they?
Yeah.
With Madam Web. What did they say about her promoting that film?
Yeah, they did. They pointed out that during the press tour, she seemed really checked out. That was the phrase.
Checked out, like just going through the motions?
Kind of. Like she wasn't fully invested or maybe didn't even really care what she was saying by that point. They read that as a sign that, what she basically signed up for was probably pretty different from the movie that actually came out. The one that was, shaped by all those committee decisions.
So she was just sort of along for the ride by the end.
That's how they put it, yeah. Just sort of along for the ride.
Interesting. So it wasn't just, this movie wasn't great, but maybe it was fundamentally changed by the process Johnson's criticizing. Now, the hosts, they took this idea of who is on the committee a bit further, too.
They did, yeah. They added this layer where it's not just people who maybe don't know films, but that the decision makers also tend to get their friends in there.
Oh, okay. Nepotism almost.
Something like that. And then according to the host's take, these groups end up trying to make movies based on what they want to see.
Right, their own little bubble.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which the hosts felt really strongly isn't what the general public.
And the results of that, according to the source, is films that just don't connect with most people.
Yeah.
So what happens then when these films flop? How do the studios react in their view?
Yeah, this was a really key point for them. They argued that instead of the studios thinking, maybe the movie itself wasn't appealing, they just blame other stuff, external things.
Like a review bomb. I think they used The Acolyte as an example.
Yes, exactly. They brought up The Acolyte. Their argument was its issues weren't really because of bad reviews primarily, but just because the general public wasn't watching it.
Not enough eyeballs, basically.
Right. Their point was not enough normies watched the damn reviews on these things to actually cause that kind of failure. Normies meaning just like average viewers not plugged into all the online drama.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
So the source is saying the studios are kind of misreading the situation. They make stuff based on what they think people want may be listening to, like a small group of friends, described as being super far a certain way. And when it doesn't land with the actual audience, they point fingers elsewhere instead of at the content itself.
Precisely. And because this whole strategy of making what the source called the wrong new things, and they specifically mentioned things like woke movies, woke shows as examples of stuff that didn't connect widely, because that wasn't working, leading to these big, expensive failures, the studios are now starting desperately to walk this shit back. That's a quote from the source.
Ah, okay. Yeah. So this is where Johnson's point about the remakes circles back. The fallout from these creative attempts failing, or at least being perceived as failures by the studios because they missed the mainstream,
is more risk aversion.
Yeah.
I get scared.
Totally. The thinking becomes, like the source put it, oh my God, all that stuff failed, so I guess we'll just go remake this movie for the third time. And then when something like Inside Out 2 gets big.
Exactly. It just reinforces that idea that sequels, familiar things, that's the safe bet. That's where the money is.
Which leads straight to what the source predicted. More Pixar sequels,
Yeah.
Tons of live-action remakes. And they tied this money first thinking directly to the top brass, right? Mentioning Bob Iger.
Yeah, Iger focusing on money, money, money. It connects to their whole point about bean counters running the show.
Bean counters, right. They named Chapek, Iger, Zaslav.
Yeah. And look, they acknowledge you need financial oversight. You can't just, burn $300 million.
For sure not.
But the suggestion from the hosts was maybe these leaders, because they're so focused on the finances, they might lack that creative gut feeling needed to champion diverse, original stuff.
And so the default, the easy decision, because the remake, the sequel, because it looks safer on a spreadsheet.
That's the source's argument, even if it's creatively kind of bankrupt. And they also pointed out how studios seem to just follow each other.
Oh, right, the lockstep idea.
Yeah, like they'll all chase the same trend. Even if it's heading towards a cliff, they'll all just walk off the cliff.
But what's really interesting is how the source contrasted this sort of blockbuster obsession with smaller film. They made a financial case, didn't they?
They absolutely did. They pointed to the huge costs and risks of these massive blockbusters versus the potential wins with smaller movies.
They gave some examples of recent lower budget successes.
Yeah, Godzilla -1, Five Nights at Freddy's, both apparently made for around $50 million or even less.
Oh, okay.
They also mentioned Minecraft, expected to be fairly cheap, and Lilo and Stitch, maybe under $100 million, possibly even heading straight to Disney plus Fit.
Yeah, they laid out the financial logic. Arguing the math on these huge films doesn't always add up.
Right, like a $300 million movie, It needs, $600 million just to break even once you factor in marketing and everything?
Roughly, yeah, maybe more.
And to make a real profit, you're looking at closer to $1 billion. They're basically asking why greenlight those if hitting $1 billion is, frankly, pretty rare.
Compared to, say, that $50 million film, it only needs $100 million to break even. If that somehow catches fire and makes, I don't know, $800 million?
The return on investment is massive compared to the $300 million one just squeaking past $1 billion.
Right.
They even brought up this analogy, apparently from the Square Enix CEO, who supposedly asks, before okaying a huge project, would I make more money just putting this cash in the bank or the stock market?
Huh. Serious?
That's what the source claimed.
Yeah.
And if the answer is yes, the project's dead, it really shows the kind of financial pressure cooker they're operating in.
Okay, so let's try and tie this all together. We've got disconnected decision makers, according to Johnson and the source. We've got studios blaming audiences instead of content when things fail, which leads to fear, risk aversion. The focus shifts purely to money, money, money.
Which drives them towards sequels and remakes.
The dynamic the source presents is that Hollywood really, really needs to recalibrate.
Yeah, find some kind of balance between giving audiences something that they will pay for, which the source argues is increasingly clear what that is, and also offering something new.
Because this current cycle of just retreading everything, the source sees that as a direct reaction to earlier attempts at new stuff failing, or new takes on old stuff failing, because they listened to the wrong people.
That's exactly their take. They listened to the wrong advisors, things didn't connect, and now maybe they're listening to the accountants a bit too much.
Pushing them towards only what seems absolutely guaranteed on paper.
Right.
And it feels like the source views this whole situation as, well, kind of obvious, but the studios seem stuck. And they ended by highlighting Dakota Johnson again.
Yeah, saying that maybe because of her family history, her position, she just had the guts to say it out loud.
To just state the problem everyone sees.
To call it out, yeah. Pointing to this basic disconnect that's creating the whole hot.
Right. I mean, juggling creativity, what audiences want, and the financial realities. It's obviously a huge challenge.
No question. But the source definitely makes a case that the current way of doing it is leading to pretty predictable, maybe uninspired results.
So thinking about everything we've unpacked here, from the source material, the critique of who's making decisions, the risk aversion, blaming the audience, the financial logic pushing remakes, what does this really mean for the movies and shows you, the listener, are going to see in the next few years?
Yeah, if this cycle of fear keeps leading back to the same old stuff, can Hollywood actually break out of it? Can they find a way to be creative, connect with people again, and still make money?
Something to think about next time you're scrolling through streaming or checking the cinema.